Our first question this week comes from YELLCOUNTYHOG 21, who asked, does Arkansas deserve to be ranked? Latest AP poll has them at 34th. That was last week, which I thought was far too low. Well, this week, I think they're 28, so they're moving up. But the bad news is I'm not sure if they get ranked, they're going to stay there. I mean, you got a 12-1 record. That's about as good as it's going to get from a win-loss percentage standpoint. So I think down the road, you start SEC, you started SEC play, now you're going to start to go on the road and you're going to lose some of those games. The problem with the polls is it's all based on where you started at the beginning, and that's based on nothing. They ought to do the AP poll and the coaches poll, you know, 4 weeks in like they do the football poll, and then it would be more accurate, but there's nothing we can do about that. I wouldn't worry about it because in college basketball, the whole thing is get into the NCAA tournament. And I think they're going to make it. Okay, our next question comes from Running Razorback, who wants to know, is it me or does it seem there's more Arkansas high school kids with interest from some bigger out-of-state programs? Just seems like reading about more than usual. A better Arkansas high school class always seems to mean a good uptick for the Hogs. And yeah, that's true. You always want to do well in state. Sometimes you don't even have to have a good overall class, just a guy like D-Mac or a guy like Matt Jones. But look, this goes back and forth over the years, 40-something years I've been doing this. And I mean, there are some years when you're going to lose 2 or 3 guys right at the top in football or maybe basketball, and some years you don't. The issue is whether or not it's related to a specific coach. And to be honest with you, I think that's what happened to Mike Anderson. Lost too many in-state guys. Fans got tired of that. Then you don't do well in the NCAA tournament. I think Brett Bielema had a problem with that. Right off the bat, I don't think, based on what we've seen in this first recruiting class, I don't think Eric Musselman is going to have a hard time getting those in-state AAU kids to come to Arkansas. If he wants them, I think he's pretty much going to get them. Don't know about Sam Pittman yet, but I would guess, as popular as he is in the state right now, that he's going to do very well with in-state guys. So maybe at least in those 2 sports, and of course in baseball, come on, they get who they want. There have been, Back 2 Hits says there have been a couple of photos where Coach Pittman and Coach Musselman have been together. What is the significance, if any, of their camaraderie of our coaches, include Coach Van Horn too, for the actual health of our athletic program? Historically, which coaches were good friends with each other? You know, I can't recall any head coach in one sport being really palsy with another coach. I think they're friends. I think they get along. I think they're around each other kind of behind the scenes in meetings in the athletic department. And we've seen coaches, I've seen Coach Van Horn at basketball games and football games. So you see them sort of showing up in other sports. I think what's different here, and I think it started with Eric Musselman, he came in and he embraced this program from the very beginning, the total program. He started showing up in baseball games right off the bat, throughout the first pitch in a game. That was very popular. He became friends with Chad Morris. Then when Morris got fired, he's already become friends with Coach Pittman, and they were together in the media room, the media type hospitality / workroom at Bud Walton Arena at halftime of the Arkansas women's game with A&M, and they were in there talking to each other, and the media was visiting with them. And you like to see that. I don't know that it's a big deal, but shoot, it couldn't hurt. I'm sure Hunter Yurachek likes it. Okay, said 76 asked, that's hard to say, what was the real story with Pittman's departure for Georgia years ago? Did he and Bielema just not get along, or is there any truth to the internet rumors Bielema blew off a recruiting visit with a highly ranked player to jet to Vegas? Well, what you mentioned was one of those rumors. I think there were a lot of them. And the problem with rumors is if somebody doesn't confirm it, it's just a rumor. So what do we got here? Well, there were rumors that Pittman and Brett Bielema both liked to backyard barbecue and throw back a few beers, and they became pals early on. But then at some point, Bielema is like having fun on Dixon Street at some of these private clubs, and he needs a designated driver at night, and Pittman gets called up in the middle of the night to come take him home. Again, I never saw that, so I can't say that it happened, but I certainly heard that it happened. But I think the one issue that I would zero in is the situation with Jim Chaney. Now, he was the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach the first 2 years under Bielema. You know, Pittman and Chaney were good friends, and Bielema had a bad habit of criticizing Chaney in press conferences. He did it after a Texas Tech game in Lubbock one year. He kept doing it to the point where Cheney got tired of it, packed up and went to Pitt. And some thought that Pittman would leave at that point. He didn't. He stayed, really liked being at Arkansas. We all know that. He likes being here. He's got ties to this area, both he and his wife. So he didn't leave, but then a year later, when Pittman was still taking shots at Cheney in press conferences, I was told Pittman reached a point where he just said, I'm not putting up with this anymore. It's unprofessional. It's stupid. And it was enough to make him leave. And I made this point in another Ask Mike episode. I'll make it again. Whatever caused this to happen, it actually ended up being a good thing for Arkansas fans, because I'm convinced if Sam Pittman didn't leave when he did, he wouldn't be the head coach here now. So things have a way of working out at the end. Okay, Kevin wants to know, what do you think the biggest positive Musselman has brought to the men's basketball program? You know, there are a bunch of them. But to me, bringing Bud Walton Arena back to life. There's been a lot of talk about reducing the number of seats in that arena. And that came, you know, during those Mike Anderson years and all the way back, Pelfrey and Stan Heath in the post-Nolan years, when some of those crowds got down to 6,000, 7,000 in December. It was really bad. You even had midweek conference games where you had 10,000, 11,000, so there's a lot of empty seats. And it reached the point where fans were seriously arguing, hey, reduce the seats, get it down to 11,000 or 12,000. That's insane. I kept saying over and over again, the right coach can fill this arena up. Do not mess with Frank Broyles' product. He went all over the country talking to architects, talking to athletic directors, people who had good on-campus arenas. And Bud Walton Arena was the product of all of those meetings he had. It's an awesome place. And when it's full, like it was the other night with the A&M game, it is a tremendous place to play basketball. So why would you want a dopey 14,000-seat arena with some more skyboxes? Woo, need more skyboxes, when you can have 19,000 people in there going nuts. So I hope Hunter Yurachek paid attention to what happened the other night. There are more sellouts coming. And I am really glad that you've got a basketball coach now that's got the kind of energy and the kind of team that can get that arena full and get people moving again. Okay, Lanny is curious. Has Clown Morris given Auburn the kiss of death? The Outback Bowl was horrendous to watch. You know, there was a character in the old Peanuts cartoon strip. I'm not sure who he was, but he walked around with a rain cloud over his head. That appears to be Chad Morris in real life. I mean, it just seems like whatever he messes with. And this is a guy that's been really successful for decades. And all of a sudden, he just can't do anything right. Now, look, I seriously doubt that Chad Morris had much to do with Auburn's game prep for that bowl game. I mean, that's on Gus Malzahn, and he's gone back and forth the whole time he's been there. They're mad at him again there. But here's the interesting part about this Chad Morris to Auburn situation. I don't think Auburn fans have looked at it closely yet, but if next year you start having quarterback problems, play calling problems, that's when they're going to start going, isn't that what happened at Arkansas? And why in the world is Gus bringing that here? Now, the opposite could happen. It could turn out that maybe Chad Morris was just a really good offensive coordinator that shouldn't have been a head coach, and maybe he'll do well at Auburn. But I got a feeling, just got a feeling, that Chad Morris at Auburn is going to be the end of Gus Malzahn. I don't think Gus has got a lot of years left at Auburn. Okay, in the Hogs We Trust, ask Mike, do you have any funny or interesting Sam Pittman stories? Okay, I saw him at halftime of the Arkansas A&M women's basketball game. He was in the media workroom. I've mentioned that before. So I go up to him and I say, you know, everybody's asking you these questions about you've never been a head coach before, but they're asking you the wrong question. And he's like, ooh, what question are you talking about? And I said, here's what I want to know. Never been a head coach before. We know you as an assistant coach, those of us in the media. So the first time you come into that media workroom, or that press conference room at the football practice center after practice next fall, are you going to come in there and take your shoes off like you always did before and sit down in a chair and let us all gather around you and we just talk? Are you going to do that? Are you going to big time it, stand up at that podium and do what Chad Morris always did and read off notes? You know, and he thought that was pretty funny, but he also didn't answer my question. And here's the issue, and this is only for us in the media. We're not sure how he's changed as a head coach. What we liked about Sam Pittman was the fact that he's just a good old boy. He'd come in there and he'd take his shoes off, sit down and talk to you. He was approachable. You could talk to him and ask him just about anything. He might not always answer you, but he didn't act offended or anything. And so we're not sure how he's going to change if he's the head coach. We're also not sure what his practice policies are going to be, and they were really bad under Chad Morris. So we got a lot still to learn, you know, about Sam Pittman as a head coach as opposed to Sam Pittman as the assistant coach. Razorbiker says, Robkin and the HOGVILLE band were such a part of a Razorback game in Barnhill. With the new energy in our basketball program, what do you think it would take to bring something like that back? I believe we can do more to make Bud Walton somewhat less stale. Look, there's never going to be another Jim Robkin. I just don't think that's ever going to happen. For one thing, the arena is not constructed the way Barnhill is. Here's the real thing that Jim Robkin did. And I want to make this point because it's important. When you have momentum in a home game, you know, you've just stolen the ball and got a dunk, then you come back down the next time, other team misses, you come down and hit a three. You got the crowd on their feet, they're going crazy. What does the opposing coach do? He calls timeout. Why? To get the crowd out of the game, to get them back down. And at most arenas, and I think Bud Walton's that way right now, you got dopey stuff going on while you have this timeout. So the crowd loses its momentum. Well, what Jim Robkin would do is he'd run around the arena looking for people that were sitting down, and he'd run up and grab them and make them stand up, and people loved it. I don't think you're going to have that, but there's got to be some way to keep those timeouts from causing a total loss of momentum from the crowd. We saw that in the A&M game last Saturday. Several times it happened. Crowd's all fired up. Buzz Williams calls timeout. Next thing you know, ooh, they got these things where guys are coming out and doing the Whataburger game or whatever. What's that have to do with keeping the crowd fired up? It's just that they got to do something about that. Okay, Bear Dog wants to know, have there been talks about the A&M game being a home and home and doing a non-conference game in Dallas? Well, I don't know if they've had talks, but I'm pretty sure when the current arrangement or contract runs out, it's over. I don't think either school wants to continue that in Dallas. They're losing too much by not playing those games, those conference games at home. That's a big game every year. It helps A&M, it would help Arkansas. And so I think that's over. And it's a good idea to replace it, the Jerry World game, with a non-conference game, maybe a Big 12 matchup every year. That would be interesting. You play a Baylor, you play a TCU, Texas Tech, maybe even Texas. Maybe you could rotate those teams. So every 4 years, you're down there playing Texas in Dallas. That would be a big game. Hawaiian Hogster asks, even though they prefer to fill the stadium in Little Rock for basketball and baseball, why not televise it for the fans that are out of state? It was sold out, so where's the harm in showing it outside the area they consider an Arkansas area? Well, I made another phone call over to the University of Arkansas because we keep getting this question about this non-streaming basketball game and the baseball game that's not streamed, and there are fans that want to see that and they're not sure why it's not happening. So I wanted to make sure I was accurate in what I told you. And what I was told today is that it's not so much trying to get the place full because they believe people are going to show up in Central Arkansas whether it's streamed or not. It really is an expense, the expense that's involved. And what you're talking about is equipping both that basketball facility and that baseball stadium with the ability to stream games on the internet. And it's more than a six-figure investment. And you're talking about the University of Arkansas putting equipment into a facility that's not their facility, and they're not comfortable with that. Now, some have suggested, well, if North Little Rock wants those games, they could just pay for it themselves. It is not their responsibility. They're not the ones asking Arkansas to do that. If Arkansas wants to come in and use their facility, that's fine. But Arkansas wants to do that. And I've talked before about why it's important. It's important to both coaches involved, both the baseball coach and the basketball coach. It's important to the athletic director. Arkansas wants that basketball game and that one baseball game in North Little Rock every year. It's the same reason I think you're going to see Sam Pittman high on playing that football game in Little Rock. And it might go back to every year. We'll have to see what happens with the new contract. But those of you who live in mainly Northwest Arkansas, and you're always making this point, the heck with Central Arkansas, the school is up here, the facility's up here, we don't want stuff down there. Get over it. This is a one-state program. They're trying to make it that way anyway, and it started a long time before Frank Broyles got here, and it's a good idea, and you cannot blow off Central Arkansas and act like they don't matter. So they're not going to invest 6 figures plus, put equipment into a baseball stadium and an arena and let it sit there, and it's not even, you know, it's their equipment, but they don't have anybody there to supervise it. So for the 1 game a year, you're just going to have to get over the fact that it's not streamed in football and then the 1 baseball game. Okay, I call that play brother, makes an interesting point here. Winning is good. Winning also makes a profit. It's possible to make almost as much profit if you're not winning, and it's less boom or bust. So is there an argument to be made that merely being competitive is fine? And do you have any idea where our athletic department stands on that? Yeah, I know where they stand on it. All you'd have to do is look at Hunter Yurachek. Why did he fire Mike Anderson? He'd never had a losing season. Because he didn't want average. He wanted something better than that. Why did he fire Chad Morris after 2 years? Most coaches get at least a third year. It's because you got an athletic director that, yes, Arkansas is making plenty of money. And even though they had attendance problems the last couple of years, and really going back 3 or 4 years, yes, the extra money from the SEC, and it's only going to go up with this new ESPN contract. So the money's going to be there. But it's not just about the money with Hunter Yurachek and the people over at the athletic department. They want to win big in football. They want to win big in basketball. And they're working toward that. So you can forget this idea that, and I think you're suspicious about that because we got a lot of Hog fans that are suspicious. Oh, well, we're just settling into mediocrity now because we're in the SEC, and it's always going to be that way. They're not thinking like that, and I'm convinced they're going to work toward, again, football, competing for an SEC West championship again, trying to go to the championship game, maybe winning that first ever SEC championship game, and going into the college playoffs. They have those goals, and they want to win the SEC in basketball. Okay, Lake City Hog asks, would you be willing to give an evaluation of Pittman's staff? Do you see any glaring weaknesses? It seems like a good mix of recruiters and teachers. Well, it's a good mix of kind of veteran experienced coaches and some younger coaches. There's only one guy on that staff, as I sit here and think, that doesn't have a whole lot of experience. The running backs coach that they just hired, he's got 1 year of experience as a college running back coach. And he did a good job at that. I mean, Georgia State had a good running game this year. But he's also going to have, you know, an offensive coordinator in Kendall Briles, who has a reputation and a history of getting a lot out of his running back. So with those two working together, I don't see any problems there. I'll tell you what you've got with this staff. And it's pretty clear what Sam Pittman did when he put this staff together. Every one of these coaches has good recruiting contacts in a specific area, not just some overall thing, which I don't think works very well. So you can start with Briles, for instance. I mean, his dad was coaching in high school in the central part of Texas for a lot of years before he got in the college game. He was at Baylor. So certainly Kendall Briles has a lot of coaching contacts all over Texas, but specifically in that Waco, San Antonio, Austin area, the central part of Texas. They've got a coach on their staff, an assistant coach who has a really good contacts in East Texas. They've got another one that has good contacts in the Houston area. They've got a coach on their staff that has really good contacts in Baton Rouge down to New Orleans, sort of that southern Louisiana area. You've got, as I mentioned, a coach on your staff now, a running backs coach who was the former athletic director of Metro Atlanta High Schools. That is, he knows all those high school coaches in the Metro Atlanta area. So you've got great recruiting contacts there. You've got a junior college coach that obviously has great contacts with other junior college coaches. You just got your bases covered. And then you've got this head coach, and I didn't mention the Missouri connection with the 2 Missouri coaches on staff. So you got that going up to St. Louis. And then you got this head coach, Sam Pittman, who has recruited Georgia, he's recruited Alabama, he's recruited North Florida, he's recruited South Carolina, he's recruited Tennessee and Arkansas. So you put all of that together, and you can see why the national and SEC media are giving Pittman already high marks for the hiring of this staff. Right now, I've read a couple of things that suggest that this may be the steal hire of the year in terms of a new head coach. He's certainly garnering more attention than Lane Kiffin is right now. Okay, Lanny is back with this hoops question. Was the A&M game closer than it should have been? The Hogs had a hard time with what is now a 6-6 team, or are the Aggies better than we thought? Well, they are better than a lot of people thought. At one point, they were a 3-5 team. They got off to a really bad start. They had turnover problems, shooting problems. But they've been on the uptick for about 3 or 4 weeks now, and they're getting better, and you could see that. I mean, they beat a good Oregon State team about a week and a half ago by 15 points, and they were 9-1 at the time, and Oregon State has since knocked off a top 25 team. So I will say this, Buzz Williams is one of the best coaches in the college game, and Eric Musselman has made that point. And barring injuries, I think they're going to get better, and they're going to pull off some upsets this season. So thankfully, one of those upsets wasn't in Bud Walton Arena, and I will tell you this, I think this basketball team is not the kind of team that's going to go around blowing people out. There'll be a lot of close games this year in the SEC. There have already been a lot of close games in November and December, and the schedule is going to get tougher starting Wednesday night in Baton Rouge, but you can't argue with being 12-1. Nobody predicted that, so be happy with that right now. Well, that's it for this week. I'll be back next Monday for more of your questions on Ask Mike.